Hi, my name's Sue Cunningham, and I won the Right Mentor Children's Novel Award in 2020. I'm just going to tell you a bit about my writing journey up until that point. So I have been writing for a few years, and I was in a critique group with some really lovely writers that I'm still in touch with, and we were all writing short stories for magazines at that point. So over the next few years, I did start writing for children, and I think it was August 2019 when I joined Twitter, which has got a really great writing community, especially for children's writers. So if you're not on Twitter, and although it's a bit of a bin fire at the moment, I would still recommend the writing community on Twitter being really supportive. And I started to come across the name Right Mentor and the competition, which I entered, I think, about 5 minutes before midnight on the deadline. I'm not expecting to hear anything, but it's always worth a try.
Hi, I'm Louise Finch. I'm a YA writer and I shortlisted in the Children's Novel Award 2020. I started writing in 2018 as part of my New Year's resolution to write a novel. I signed up to a creative writing course that started in January of that year, and through that I met a bunch of other writers who were working on their novels too, and I heard that you should write first drafts quickly and then edit slowly. So I took that advice very much to heart, and in that first year I wrote 3 full drafts of novels. The first 2 were terrible, absolutely awful, so they didn't really get past the first draft stage, but the third one was also terrible, but I thought that the concept had legs, so I spent the next year editing that, reshaping it, changing it into something that wasn't terrible. And then by 2020, I was ready to start querying it, and I'd sort of started sending out to a few agents, and I discovered Right Mentor around that time, and started for the first time making connections within the kind of YA and kidlit community, finding other writers who were writing in my genre, taking a few courses through Right Mentor, and of course I discovered the Right Mentor Children's Novel Award.
I'd entered quite a few competitions before this one, and the thing I remember about this was the level of support that everybody involved in running the competition, Stuart and his team, were so welcoming and so supportive and kept everyone updated all the way through as to when the shortlist was going to be out, when the long list was going to be out. You knew where you were up to. It wasn't one of those competitions where you just pay your money and then it disappears into the ether and you never find out who's won and you never find out what's happened. So really, really great experience from the start. So to find out I was on the long list was a really nice surprise, and it was quite a long list. So expectations were in check. But my favourite thing about the long list announcement was seeing the readers' favourites, which I think was a new thing for me. So at the time, there were 2 lists of favourites, the children's readers and adult readers. And I was really pleased to see that my title was on both lists. And that's a really lovely support, because even if you haven't been longlisted, you still have the opportunity to have your name on the readers' favourites list, which is a really nice boost for everybody. And there were some great titles on there. And there was one, I think it must have been a picture book, called Which Is Not Going to the Doctors. And I'm still intrigued by that title years later, and I would love to read it. If anyone who wrote that book wants to get in touch and let me know. So moving on to the shortlist announcement, which would have been a few weeks or months later, I'm not quite sure now. So this was really exciting. So with regards to the shortlist, which will have been a few weeks or maybe a couple of months later, I'm not sure, but I will have been kept updated of that. Really exciting to see that my title was still there. Because shortlists are normally displayed alphabetically, and my book had a numeric element in the title. It was 49 Sisters. Really nice to be able to see straight away that I was still on the list. So if your title starts with an A, you'll be able to see straight away if you've been shortlisted or longlisted without having to scroll down. And I didn't know any of the other titles on the list, and it's really weird because a lot of those people on that list are writing friends now. So it's, shortlist. It was just friends I'd yet to meet. So competition announcement, I knew exactly when it was going to be and even what time the announcement was going to be, which was noon. And I was at work. The pandemic had just started, and because I work for the NHS, I was still in work, but we were trying to manage our patients remotely. I work in an outpatient clinic, and we were not allowed to bring anyone in unless there was risk of life or limb. So we were trying to do telephone assessments, which is not easy. But I had booked my break for 12 o'clock so I could see the announcement on Twitter. And the signal is not very good in the hospital. So I'm hanging out of the window and waving my phone in the air trying to get a signal. And the announcement came up, and there were videos of Alice Williams, who was the very lovely agent judge who was going to talk about each entry before announcing the winner. I couldn't get any of the videos to load. So I had to just scroll down to the bottom without watching any of the videos and to see my name. And just then the phone rang. It was my husband and my sons who were at home because schools had been closed. So they were studying from home. And they were ringing up to tell me that I'd won. And they were trying to play the videos to me over the phone because I couldn't get them to work at work. So that was really exciting. I managed to finish early that day and went home. And there was just so much support on Twitter and writing community. It was just overwhelming, really. So really, really lovely. So just a little shout out to other people on the shortlist. As I say, friends that you haven't met yet. So Sophia Payne, who won the Right Mentor Picture Book Award that year, and she's done amazingly well, and I think her debut is out next year. Caroline Murphy, who is now agented by the same agent as me, so we are agency sisters at Blair, and Lou Finch, who has had her amazing debut out, The Eternal Return of Clara Hart. If you haven't read this YA book, it is fantastic, and it has been nominated for the Carnegie. So she's done amazingly well. And Lou and I know each other quite well because we went on to do summer mentoring with Right Mentor the same year, which is a different story. Not what I'm here to talk about today, but that was a brilliant experience if you get the opportunity to apply. I was mentored by Melissa Welliver, one of the Right Mentor team, who is fabulous. And so Lou and I know each other well through that, and we are still in touch with almost everyone that was in the YA group that year. So, it's just another way that Right Mentor brings people together to support one another. Really good writing friends through Right Mentor.
I'm quite an anxious writer in general. I find it quite difficult to share my work. So the idea of entering a novel competition and literally sending my work in there to be judged was quite difficult. But I went in with the attitude that if I sent it off, I could kind of assume that it wasn't going to get anywhere. I just kind of tried to forget about it. So when the long list came out and the short list and my novel was on there, I was just on the floor with surprise. I was so shocked to think that strangers had, picked it and put it forward on those lists. And it really meant the world to think that had happened, because it was the first good thing that had happened to my writing and that novel. So it ended up being the most brilliant experience. I'm completely delighted that I did go for it, and I would encourage anybody who's kind of on the fence about entering to just go for it, and to not talk yourself out of it, and to not think that you're not good enough and therefore you shouldn't even enter, because you just need enough confidence to press send. You don't need to think you're going to win, you don't need to think you're going to list, you just need to press send.
So after the award, I was very fortunate, and I had a lot of interest in my winning entry, 49 Sisters, and I had a lot of requests for full manuscript and a lot of agent interest, but never quite moved forward. I don't know if it was the pandemic or it just wasn't quite the right time for that book. But I think the the whole sort of ethos of Right Mentor is that you're there for the experience, not the end result, and to just keep going and enjoy the experience. So I did move forward, and I went back to another project which I'd been on and off with over the years. And I joined Scooby. So Right Mentor is absolutely wonderful, but I would encourage you to cast your net widely and join as many organisations as you can and get as many critique partners as you can. And I'm really greedy, so I like to have lots of critique partners and lots of support. And I entered Undiscovered Voices and was very fortunate to be chosen for the anthology with my newer book, which was at the time called Heart and Soul. So I got quite a lot of interest in that off the back of the anthology. But, again, cast your net widely. I continue to send out cold submissions, and I again had a bit more agent interest. I was very fortunate to have a few offers of representation, and I eventually signed with Rachel Petty from Blair, who is absolutely wonderful, and signed my contract on April Fool's Day. So wasn't quite sure for a while if it was just an elaborate joke, but it was not. Rachel and I worked on the book together, and it went out on submission in the summer. And really, really fortunate to get very early interest from Scholastic, who have picked up my book, which is not called Heart and Soul any longer. And that will be published in 2023. So I would encourage you, my final bit of advice is to just say you've got absolutely nothing to lose by entering this award, and you've got everything to gain. So just go for it, be brave, and the best of luck.
After the Children's Novel Award, I went on to be mentored through the Right Mentor Summer Programme by Emma Finlayson-Palmer and Carolyn Ward. And while we were working on my manuscript together, I was contacted by an agent who I'd queried before that process started, who had found me in the slush pile, and she ended up offering me representation. So although the awards and the mentoring was so useful in helping to shape the manuscript and helping me sort of have something to put in my writing bio, I just found my agent through the standard querying process. And then after we'd done a few edits together, I ended up going on sub, and I got a big deal. So the novel that was shortlisted for the Right Mentor Children's Novel Award in 2020 is now a real book. It's still called The Eternal Return of Clara Hart, and it came out from Little Island Books in August 2022. It's a YA novel about a boy stuck in a time loop trying to save a girl who dies at the end of every night. And it probably wouldn't have been here without the Right Mentor Children's Novel Award.